back to the next video. Submit critical updates and fixes instantly through OTA. Issue traditional ways of updating apps are too slow and you lose your precious time on them. The traditional model of sending updates on mobile is fundamentally different from the one we know from writing JavaScript application from other platform. Unlike the web, mobile deployment is much more complex and comes with better security out of the box. We have talked about that in detail in the previous section focused on CI/CD. What does it mean for your business? Every update, no matter how quickly shipped by your developer, is usually going to wait some time while the App Store and Play Store teams review your product against their policy and best practices. This process is particularly challenging in all Apple platform where apps are often taken down or rejected because of not allowing following certain policies or meeting the required standard for the user interface. Thankfully, the risk of your app been rejected with React Native is reduced to minimum as you are working on the JavaScript part of the application. The React Native core team ensures that all the changes done to the framework have no impact on the success of your application submission. As a result, the submission process takes a while, and if you are about to ship a critical update, every minute counts. Fortunately, with React Native, it is possible to dynamically ship your JavaScript changes directly to your users, skipping the App Store review process. This technique is often referred to as an over the air update. It lets you change the appearance of your application immediately for all the user following the technique that you have selected. When critical bugs happen, minutes and hours can be critical. Don't wait for Apple and Google to review your app. If your application is not OTA ready, your risk is being left with a critical bug on many devices for as long as Apple and Google reviews your product and allows it to be distributed. Even though the review times have gotten much better over the years, it is still a good escape hatch to be able to immediately recover from an error that shipped through the testing pipeline and into production. Implement OTA updates with App Center, Code Push, and EAS build. As mentioned earlier, React Native is OTA ready. It means that its architecture and design choices make such updates possible. However, it doesn't ship with the infrastructure to perform such operation. To do so, you will need to integrate a third-party service that carry its own infrastructure. For doing so, there are two popular ways to implement OTA in your app. The most popular one for OTA is Code Push, a service that is part of Microsoft App Center suite. The second tool is by exporting, and it's called EES Update App Center / Code Push. Configuring the native side to integrate Code Push into your application. Please follow the required setups for Android and iOS respectively. We decided to link to the official guides instead of including the steps here, as they include additional native code to apply, and that is very likely to change in the coming months. Configuring the JavaScript side. Once you set up the service on the native side, you can use the JavaScript API to enable updates and define when they should happen. One of the ways that enable fetching updates on the app startup is to use the Code Push wrapper and wrap your main component. That's it. If you have performed all the changes on the native side, your application is now OTA ready. For more advanced use cases, you can also change the default settings on when to check for updates and when to download and apply them. For example, you can force Code Push to check for updates every time the app is brought back to the foreground and install updates on the next resume. The following diagram code snippet demonstrates such a solution. Shipping updates to the application. After configuring Code Push on both JavaScript and native side of React Native, it's time to launch the update and let your new customers enjoy it. To do so, we can do this from the command line by using App Center CLI, and then release a command to build React Native SSL files and send them to the cloud. Once these steps are complete, all users running your app will receive the updates using the experience you configured in the previous section. Before publishing a new Code Push release, you will have to create an application in the App Center dashboard that will give you the owner name and app name that you are looking for. As said before, you can either do this via UI by visiting App Center or by using the App Center CLI. EAS update. EAS stands for Expo App Services. One of its stories, EAS update. It's a nice alternative to Code Push, especially if you are already running an Expo app. As with other Expo products, it provides superior DX and is usually a pleasure to work with. Installing a EAS CLI. First, what you need to do is install the EAS CLI package by passing the command, or you can just use npx EAS-CLI to run the command. To get the ES update working in your project with the bare React Native workflow, you need to set up Expo in your project. See the guide to make that work correctly. Setting up the build tool and ES update to build your app. You can use either ES build or another tool. If you don't want to use ES build, here's a guide on what to do. Then you need to initialize your project with ES build. After this command, you need to set up the configuration file for build. After running this command, the es.json file will be created in the root directory of your project. It contains the whole config for ES to run properly. Info: if you are using the bare React Native workflow, you will need to make some additional configuration. Read the guide to see how to do it. Creating the build, then you need to create the build. You can do it with ES build command. Creating update: once you have installed this build on your device, we are ready to send the update to the devices. So make some changes to the GS part of the app to see if it actually works. After we install the update on the phone, then you are ready to run the command which created the update and upload it to ES. Once the steps are complete, all users running your app will receive the update with your changes. You can configure ES update in many different ways. You can play with different branches, different setups, and even a custom host update service. ES update is very handy when you need to deploy your changes to the production, but it's also very handy in the development process. It's convenient to allow other developers to preview the update for reviewing purposes. Benefits: ship critical fixes and some content instantly to the user with OT updates integrated in your application. You can send your JavaScript update to all your users in matter of minutes. This possibility may be crucial for fixing significant bugs or sending instant patches. For example, it may happen that your backend will stop working and it causes a crash at startup. It may be handled error. You never had a backend failure during the development and forgot to handle such edge cases. You can fix the problem by displaying a fallback message and informing users about the problem. While the development will take you around 1 hour, the actual update and review process can take hours, if not days. With OT update setup, you can react to this in minutes without risking the bad UX that will affect the majority of users. Make your app consistently fast. Use the DMIIC process to help you prevent regressing on app performance. Every once in a while, after fixing a performance issue, the app gets slow again. Customers has very little patience for slow app. There is so much competition on the market that customers can quickly switch to another app. According to the Unbounce report, nearly 70% of customers admit that the pay speed influences their willingness to buy. Good example here are Walmart and Amazon. Both of these companies noticed an increase in revenue by up to 1% for every 100 millisecond of load time improvement. The performance of website and mobile app can thus noticeably impact business performance. It's become increasingly important to not only fix performance issue but also make sure they don't happen again. You want your React Native app to perform well and fast at all times. Solution: use the DMIC methodology to help you solve performance issue consistently. From the technical perspective, we should begin by avoiding any guesswork and base all decisions on data. Poor assumptions lead to false results. We should also remember that improving performance is a process, so it's impossible to fix everything at once. Small steps can provide big results. This all leads us to the fact that developing an app is a process. There are some interactions that lead to results, and what is most important, the process can be optimized. One of the most effective ways of doing that is by using the DMAC methodology. It's very data driven and well structured and can be used to improve React Native app. The acronym stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Let's see how we can apply each phase in our apps. Define: in this phase, we should focus on defining the problem, what we want to achieve, opportunities for improvement, etc. It's important to listen to the customer's voice in this phase, their expectation and feedback. It helps to better understand the needs and preferences and what problems they are facing. Next, it is important to measure it somehow. Let's say the customer wants a fast checkout. After analyzing the components, we know that to check this, we need a swift checkout process, a short wait time, and a smooth animation and transition. All of these points can be decomposed into critical to quality that are measurable and can be tracked. For example, a short wait time can be decomposed into a quick server response and a low number of server errors. Another handy tool is analyzing common user path with good tracking. We can analyze and understand what parts of the app are mostly used by the users. In this phase, it's very important to choose priorities. It should end up with defining the order in which we will optimize things. Any tools and techniques for prioritizing will definitely help there. Ultimately, We need to define where we want to go. We should define our goals and what exactly we want to achieve. Keep in mind that it all should be measurable. It's a good practice to put these goals in the project scope. Measure, since we already know where we want to go, it's time to assess the starting point. It's all about collecting as much data as possible to get the actual picture of the problem. We need to ensure the measurement process is precise. It's really helpful to create a data collection plan and engage the development team to build the metrics. After all, it's time to do some profiling. When profiling in React Native, the main question is whether to do this on JavaScript or on the native side. It heavily depends on the architecture of the app, but most of the time it's a mix of both. One of the most popular tools is React Profiler, which allows us to wrap a component to measure the render time and the number of renders. Is very helpful because many performance issues come from unnecessary re-renders. Discover how to use it here. It will output the data. The second tool is created by Shopify, React Native Performance. It allows you to place some markers in the code and measure the execution time. There is also a pretty nice Flipper plugin that helps you visualize the output. Speaking of Flipper, it has some more plugins that helps us measure the app performance and speed up the development process. We can use React Native Performance Monitor plugin for a lighthouse like experience, or React Native Performance List Profiler plugin. On the native side, the most common method is using native IDs, Xcode and Android Studio. There are plenty of useful insights which can be analyzed and lead to some conclusion and result. The most important aspect of this phase is measurement variation. Due to different environment, we have to be very careful when profiling. Even if the app is run on the same device, there might be some external factors that affect performance measurement. That's why we should base all the measurements on release builds. Analyze. The goal of this phase is to find out the root cause of our problem. It's a good idea to start with list of things that could potentially cause the problem. A little brainstorming with the team is really helpful here. One of the most popular tools to define a problem is called a cause and effect diagram. It looks like a fish and we should draw it from right to left. We start from the head and it should contain the problem statement. At this stage we should already have it. Based on the define phase, then we identify all the potential major causes of the problem and assign them to the fish bones. After that, we assign all the potential causes to each major cause. There are many things that could have an impact on performance. The list could get really long, and so it's important to narrow it down, outline the important factors and focus on them. Finally, it's time to test the hypothesis. For example, if the main problem is low FPS and the potential major cause is related to list rendering, we can think of some improvements in the area of images in the list item. We need to design a test that will help us accept or reject the hypothesis. It will be probably some kind of proof of concept. Next, we will interpret the results and decide if it was improved or not. Then we will make a final decision. Improve. Now we know what our goal is and how we want to achieve. It's time to make some improvement. This is the phase where optimization techniques start to make sense. Before starting, it's a good idea to have the next brainstorming session and identify potential solution depending on the root cause. There might be a lot of them. Based on the last example with images on the list item, we can think about implementing proper image caching and reducing unnecessary image render. After outlining the solution, it's time to pick up the best ones. Sometimes the solution that gives the best effects might be extremely costly. Example, when it's necessary to make some architectural changes, it's then time to implement the solution. After that, it's required to properly test it and we are done. Control. The last step is in the control phase. We need to make sure that everything works well. The performance will degrade if it is not under control. People tend to blame devices, they use technology, or even users when it comes to bad performance. So what do we need to do is to keep our performance on a high level. We need to make sure that we have a control plan. We can use some of our work from the previous phases to make it. We should point out focal points of measurement characteristic, acceptable ranges for indicators and testing frequency. Additionally, it is good practice to write down some procedures and what to do if we spot issues. The most important aspect of the control phase is monitoring regression. Until recently, it was quite difficult to do that in React Native, but now we have plenty of options to improve our monitoring. Real-time user monitoring. One way to keep the performance improvement we introduce in our app is through real-time monitoring tools such as Firebase Performance Monitoring, which is a service that gives us some insights into performance issues in production, or Sentry Performance Monitoring, which tracks application performance, collect metrics like throughput and latency, and displays the impact of errors across multiple services. It's a great addition to any app builders that want to have insights on how the performance is distributed across all the devices that install their app based on real user data. Testing regression as part of the development process. Another way to keep performance regression under control is through automated testing. Profiling, measuring, and running on various devices is quite manual and time consuming. That's why developer avoid doing it. However, it gets too easy to unintentionally introduce performance regression that would only get caught during QA or worse by your user. Thankfully, we have a way to write automated performance regression test in JavaScript for React and React Native. Reassure allows you to automate React Native app performance regression testing on CA or local machine in the same way you write your integration unit tests that automatically verify that your app is still working correctly. You can write performance tests that verify that your app is still working performantly. You can think about it as a React Native performance testing library. In fact, Reassure is designed to reuse as much of your React Native testing library test and setup as possible, and it's designed by its maintainers and creator. It works by measuring certain characteristic, render duration and render count of the testing scenario you provide, and comparing that to the stable version measured beforehand. It repeats the scenario multiple times to reduce the impact of random variations in render time caused by the runtime environment. Then it applies a statistical analysis to figure out whether the code changes are statistically significant or not. As a result, it generates a human readable report summarizing the results and displays it on CI or as a comment to your pull request. The simplest test you can write would look something like this. This test will measure the render times of a component during mounting and the resulting sync effect. Let's take a look at a more complex example though. Here we have a component that has a counter and a slow list component, and the performance test looks as follows. When you run through it, Reassure will generate a performance comparison report. It's important to note that to get a depth of measurement, we need to run it twice. The first time with a -- baseline flag, which collects the measurement under the Reassure directory. After running this command, we can start optimizing our code and see how it affects the performance of our component. Normally, we would keep the baseline measurement and wait for performance regressions to be caused and reported by Reassure. In this case, we will just skip that step and jump straight into optimizing because we just noticed a nice possibility to do so. And since we have our baseline measurement for reference, we can actually verify our assumptions and whether the improvement was real or only subjective. The possibility we noticed is that the slow list component can be memoized, and as it doesn't depend on any external variable, we can leverage the use memo for that case. Once we are done, we can run Reassure a second time, now without the baseline flag. That Reassure has two test runs to compare the current and the baseline. It can perform a performance comparison report, as you notice. Thanks to applying memoization to the slow list component rendered by the async component, the render duration went from 78.4 millisecond to 26.3 millisecond, which is roughly a 66% performance improvement. The test results are assigned to certain categories. Significant changes to render duration shows a test scenario where the change is statistically significant and should be locked into it, as it marks a potential performance loss / improvement. Meaningless changes to render duration shows test scenarios where the change is not statistically significant. Changes to render count shows test scenarios where the render count did change. Added scenarios shows test scenarios that do not exist in the baseline measurements. Remote scenario shows test scenarios that do not exist in the current measurements. When connected with Danger.js, Reassure can output this report in the form of a GitHub command, which helps catch the regression during code review. You can discover more use cases and example in the docs. Benefits of well-structured and organized optimization process when working on an app, regardless of its size. Is important to have a clear path for reaching our goal. The main benefit of using DMAG when optimizing React Native application is a structured and direct approach. Without it, it may be difficult to verify what works and why. Sometimes our experience and intuition are just enough, but that's not always the case. Having a process like this allows us to focus on problem solving and constantly increasing productivity. Thanks to the DMAG approach, performance optimization becomes part of your normal development workflow, making your app closer to being performant by default, spotting the performance issues even before they hit your user. No software is flawless. Bugs and performance issues will happen even if you are the most experienced developer on the team, but we can take action to mitigate those risks by using automated tools like Sentry, Firebase, or Reassure, using them in your project and enjoying the additional confidence they bring to your projects and the improved UX they bring to your users in turn. Know how to profile iOS. Yeah, we will check this in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.